Now, for more insights, we speak to MK Party spokesperson Nhlamulo Ndhlela. Nhlamulo, thank you so much for joining us, and a very good evening to you. Now, the Democratic Alliance, together with the advocacy groups that approached the Western Cape High Court, are pleading for an urgent interdict barring Dr Hlophe from taking part in the JSC's interviews for candidates in terms of the vacancies on the bench that's coming now in October, saying that those appointments would be tainted. What impact do you believe this entire matter has, not just in the decisions taken by the National Assembly, but in terms of a precedence that's being set?
Well, thank you, and good evening to your viewers. Let's start with your use on these institutions being advocacy groups. They're not advocacy groups. They're really extension of foreign agencies and therefore funded accordingly to achieve certain objectives, as is the case with what we're seeing here. With regards to the DA's frivolous case, it's really, quite honestly, it's a witch hunt on Dr. Hlophe. Dr. Hlophe has got a B juris from Forte. He's got an LLB from the KwaZulu-Natal University, and completed his doctorate in the 80s, including him having studied and written articles in customary law. So who better suited to serve in that committee? And including the fact that, remember, Parliament draws its powers and its privileges from the Constitution, and effectively, by virtue of that, gets the privilege to create its own rules and make its own rules, one of those being if you're a member of Parliament and you're eligible, such as the case with him, you can participate in any committee. What we then ask ourselves is, you've got the likes of Glenys Breitenbach, who was fired for deleting evidence from the NPA, but she can participate as a member of Parliament in the same committee. So what we're seeing here, as we say, it's a witch hunt. It's just total hypocrisy on the DA's end, and that's that. Nothing else but racism at play.
So, I mean, speaking of the DA, they cited that the National Assembly was irrational in its decision-making, and in their own words says it rubber-stamped the nomination of Dr. Hlophe, and they are of the sentiment that the formation of the JSC shouldn't be like that of every other portfolio committee within the National Assembly. What's your sentiments on that?
Well, that again just confirms the sense of entitlement that the minorities who happen to get 22% and who never won the election think that they can determine the will of the people. You can't determine the will of the people. The people voted Umkhonto weSizwe in, and Judge Hlophe is our leader. And whatever it is that they employ in their attempt to try and remove Judge Hlophe is not going to fly. And they know that. This, from where we're sitting, to be honest, is just total or nothing more than just intellectual masturbation. The DA likes to peacock. That's all they're doing here. And kick and scream like a child who's a spoiled brat.
So with the stance that the ANC had taken when the designation of Dr. Hlophe was put in, what was your analysis as the MK party with regards to how they stood in this entire situation?
Well, we've always said that there is this ANC of Ramaphosa and there's the true ANC. And, the reality is, as parties that represent the majority, we ought to be focusing on what is best for our people, because that's why we voted into Parliament. And when it comes to decisions that, quite honestly, are important to ensuring that we advance our policies and address our people's challenges, and the reason why they brought us in the first place to do exactly that, then it's a logical decision. Certain things need not to be politicized. If the decision makes sense, of the back of a person who's got all the qualifications and who's going to assist better than anyone else, by the way, if you look at it in terms of his qualifications and his experience. I mean, over 25 years of experience in the judiciary. Who else is best suited? So naturally, certain decisions ought not to be politicized and based on merit. And that's what's happening here.
So, but Nhlamulo, you must admit that this is a pivotal tipping point in our democracy. I mean, I can't imagine that those that formulated our constitution ever envisaged an impeached judge serving on the JSC. Was this a deliberate and intentional move by the MK party in your organization's endeavor to challenge the status quo?
In terms of, well, firstly, we've always said that, this constitution doesn't suit the needs of our people. It has continued to perpetuate the plight of poverty for the past 30 years. Let's start there. That's the first point. The other point is, I think you'd be quite honestly undermining the thinking that went into those that would have drafted it, taking into consideration the issue of the presidency being impeached. I mean, if you look at the prescripts that they put in there for a president and them being impeached, they're quite clear. They clearly took into mind certain scenarios that may be certain outcomes such as this. So I wouldn't say that the drafters of this particular prescript of the law may not have anticipated what's going to happen here. They clearly should have and would have anticipated it. But the reality still stands that, the parliament draws its powers from the constitution, and the parliament has got, in terms of its privileges and powers, to make rules that will suit it. And as long as you're an eligible member of parliament in the National Assembly, nothing stops you from participating, as is the case with Dr. Hlophe.
So judgment has been reserved. Should the court then rule against the MK party, what's your next move?
Well, we continue to do our work because here's the reality, and I continue to say this. Where MK exists and where black professionals exist and excel more than anything else, in actual fact, where black professionals excel, they don't exist, and that's their biggest problem. They are fearful of the black professionals that we've brought on board, and because of their racist stance and in their fear, they are very worried that we are going to expose a lot of things that they're doing and that they have been doing, and we're going to hold them to account. So where we excel, they don't exist.